The much anticipated Dune Part 2 is out now. Is it good? Yes. Is it great? Yes. Is it one of the all-time greatest science fiction films comparable to Empire Strikes Back? Yeah, I think it probably is. Dune 2, and yes, I do pronounce it Dune, is a beautiful, complex, intimate love letter to Frank Herbert's Dune novel, whilst also being much bigger in scope, incredibly ambitious, and is a rare example of the sequel surpassing the original. First, I'll break down the plot, rate the movie, and then I'll cover what I liked and a few aspects I didn't like, before finally looking at what this means for Dune Part 3. And yes, there will be Dune Part 3. Full spoilers ahead, so if you want to go into the movie blind, then perhaps save the video and come back to it later.
What if Paul Atreides were still alive?
So we kick off Part 2 with Paul Atreides, played by Timothée Chalamet, and his mother, Lady Jessica, played by Rebecca Ferguson. Jessica is pregnant with Paul's sister. We see Paul, Jessica, and the Fremen fighting against the Harkonnens, who took back control of Arrakis from House Atreides at the end of Dune Part 1. Princess Irulan Carino, played by Florence Pugh, acts as a narrator for the majority of the film. The Fremen, especially Stilgar Javier Bardem, see signs in Paul that he is the Kit Kat Paddywhack. No, sorry, the Kwisatz Haderach. Lady Jessica becomes the Reverend Mother of the Fremen as she acts upon the prophecies, myths and legends sewed into Fremen culture by the Bene Gesserit thousands of years ago. Lady Jessica must drink the Water of Life, a poison that's fatal to men and untrained women, which gives the drinker the ability to see memories of all the Reverend Mothers that came before. This water also gives Lady Jessica's unborn baby, Aaliyah, pre-life. Aaliyah speaks to Jessica and encourages her to spread the prophecy of Paul being the Quidditch Flappy Flap. Nope, wrong again, Kwisatz Haderach. Chani and Paul fall in love with each other as she guides him on his quest to become ingrained in the Fremen culture. We see Fremen, believers and non-believers in the prophecy, grow to respect and worship Paul, as he rides the giant sandworm, fights the Harkonnens, and embraces Fremen traditions. Meanwhile, Baron Vladimir Harkonnen, Stellan Skarsgård, demotes Rabban, Dave Bautista, for failing to stop the Fremens from disrupting their spice harvesting. And the Baron makes his sociopathic younger nephew, Fade Rotha, as a new leader of Arrakis.
Fade Rotha? He's psychotic.
Fade attacks the Fremen holy site, and Paul reluctantly travels south to join his mother with the fundamentalist Fremen, who believe Paul to be the one to lead them to paradise. Paul has been receiving visions throughout the movie of a holy war that he will lead the Fremen into. His reluctancy to head south and join his mother and the southern Fremen was because he foresaw the death and destruction the holy war will bring. Now in South Arrakis, Paul consumes the Water of Life and falls into a coma, but is reawakened by Chani, making him the only man to survive drinking the Water of Life, which furthers his status among the Fremen. Paul now has a clearer sense of the past and future and grudgingly embraces his destiny to lead the Fremen to war and claim the throne of the Emperor. This is when we see a dramatic change in Paul. During his coma, he finds out that Lady Jessica is Baron Harkonnen's daughter, meaning that Big Vlad is Paul's grandfather. He embraces his Harkonnen side, and Paul declares himself as the leader of the Fremen. The Emperor then arrives on Arrakis with his daughter, the Princess, the Great Mother, and his Sardaukar soldiers. The Emperor questions Baron Vlad Harkonnen as to why the spice production is being affected by the Fremen. Paul interrupts the Emperor's confrontation with the Baron, launching atomic warheads, which Gurney, Josh Brolin, had helped Paul recover from a secret location earlier. Using these weapons and a large sandstorm as cover, the Fremen overpower the Sardaukar forces by riding sandworms straight through the Emperor's defences. Gurney slays Rabban in a rather anticlimactic way, and Paul kills Baron Vladimir Harkonnen, his grandfather. Paul threatens to destroy the spice fields forever with the remaining atomic weapons at his disposal, unless the Emperor surrenders the throne and the great houses accept Paul as the new Emperor. Fade Rotha challenges Paul to a duel as the Emperor's champion, and in a ridiculously tense and brilliantly choreographed fight, Fade is eventually killed by Paul. Paul tells Chani that he will always love her. and then asks Princess Lurin to marry him. The princess agrees, as long as Paul spares her father, the Emperor's life. Chani, rather ticked off with who Paul has now become, leaves and goes to the desert and calls forth a sandworm. Princess Lurin consents to marry Paul, whilst above Arakeen, spaceships from the many great houses who refuse to accept Paul's ascendancy arrive, ready to fight the new Emperor. Paul orders his Fremen army to lead their enemies to paradise, as Jessica tells unborn Elia that the Holy War has begun. So now, on to the ratings. Plot scores 9, entertainment value scores 8, characters and performances 9, visuals 10, sound scores 8, the ending scores an 8, and 1 bonus point for the incredible fight between Paul and Fade. It was one of those rare movie moments where I could feel my heart literally pounding while the fight was underway. This leaves my overall rating for Dune Part 2 at a rather high 88%. So now on to the positives. Let's first talk about the obvious. The visuals are great. The spice harvesters, the sandworms, the costumes, the Emperor's ship, which has got to be the coolest ship of all time. It's a completely immersive experience. At no part did I think that anything looked fake, or oh, that's an obvious green screen. The VFX were blended in so well, truly brilliant work from all involved. From the cinematographer Greg Fraser to the many nameless VFX artists. The performances were also top tier. I don't think I've ever seen such a star-studded cast. In fact, it was almost too star-studded. I wish I could have seen more of the side characters, like Christopher Walken's Emperor and Dave Bautista's Radon, because they were just so interesting. Timothée Chalamet's performance is great. First, he plays a fish out of water, learning the ways of the Fremen, whilst wrestling with his destiny as their prophesied leader. And after drinking from the water of life, he becomes this all-knowing, all-powerful, supernatural being, able to silence the Great Mother herself and take on the combined armies of House Harkonnen and the Emperor's house, House Carino. He's believable in both roles and delivers the best performance of his career. Zendaya as Chani serves as a mirror to show us what Paul has become. Her reactions and feelings towards Paul are Denis Villeneuve's way of telling us how we should perceive and keep track of Paul's declining morality, as he transitions into the godlike entity he becomes in the last third of the movie. Villeneuve, like any adaptation, changes a few things from the source material, but much like Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings movies, Villeneuve brilliantly and faithfully conveys the themes of religion, the dangers of prophecies, political machinations, and ecology that were central to Herbert's books. So despite changing a few parts here and there, Denis Villeneuve showed a lot of respect to Frank Herbert's original works. Rebecca Ferguson as Lady Jessica also played her role fantastically. Like Paul, she is much changed after drinking the water of life, and her relationship with unborn Elia, aka the voice of Anya Taylor-Joy, was fascinating. The same praise goes for Austin Butler, who had such presence from his first minute on screen to his last. The battle between Paul, the Fremen, House Harkonnen and the Emperor was really good. Not quite Two Towers Helm's Deep level, but there's not much at that level really. So obviously, I did love the movie. However, that's not saying that I don't have a few criticisms to make. Now these points should be seen as nitpicks more than big issues with Dune Part 2. The pacing is slow. Yes, we need to build up the relationships between Paul and Chani, and yes, we need to introduce Fade and world build the different groups and cultures in play. But I can see quite a few people being bored in the first half of the movie. To be fair to Villeneuve, there is a lot to adapt, and even with 2 parts, there's still a lot left out from the 800-page novel. There's a reason why Dune is considered as being very, very difficult to adapt to film, as it's such a dense, intertwining book. I would have also liked to see more of Christopher Walken's Emperor and Florence Pugh's Princess Lurin. It's almost like there were too many great actors, and some were pushed to the side. Same goes for Stellan Skarsgård's Baron Vladimir Harkonnen. Speaking of House Harkonnen, they come across as a lot less threatening and almost incompetent really, compared to the calculating evil Harkonnens in Part 1. Only Fade posed any real threat to Paul and the Fremen. Rabban flees from Paul and then gets defeated by Gurney all too easily, and Baron Vladimir doesn't have the presence that he did in part 1. And my final nitpick is more of a warning for those who expect a happy ending or even a satisfying ending at all. Part 1 is notorious for having a rather odd ending, where the movie finishes at the end of Act 2, possibly at the start of Act 3. Part 2 has a similar ending, where it introduces key characters who will have a much bigger role to play in Part 3, and it establishes the Holy War plot for the third movie. And then we turn to the credits. It certainly makes you want more Dune, but in my cinema, there was certainly a palpable, oh, that's the end of the film. Paul is not Luke Skywalker. He is an anti-hero, and his victory with his Fremen minions doesn't really feel like good triumphing over evil. The Harkonnens and the Emperors were wrong, but Paul and the Fremens certainly don't have the moral high ground. Paul is not a protagonist, he's a warning to us, not to follow blindly and listen to those who speak of a higher purpose and lack humility and humanity. This is exactly as Frank Herbert intended the character to be perceived, and Villeneuve has stayed faithful to Herbert's central message. I have to admit though, this does make Paul's victory against the Harkonnens and the Emperor feel kind of hollow. Whilst we're on the subject, the ending of Part 2 with Shani calling the Sandworm and Jessica declaring that the Holy War has begun, on top of Villeneuve confirming that he's finished writing a script for Part 3, confirms that there will be a Dune trilogy. Villeneuve said, "The second one, movie, will definitely be more visual and less dialogue driven, and hopefully there will be another film after that. Dune Messiah, Herbert's second novel in this universe, would make total sense as a third movie, because it completes Paul Atreides' arc." Villeneuve went on to say he wanted to make Part 2 as fast as possible, and then wait a few years until Timothée Chalamet gets a bit older to do the final instalment. Combine this with the fantastic reviews and strong forecasts for Part 2's box office, and you can almost guarantee that there will be a third movie.
You're brave, we all know that. Be simple.
When looking at the Film Club leaderboard, Dune Part 2 is in second place with 88%. Though in my opinion, it really is one of the best movies of the last decade, if not one of the best of the last few decades. Compared to other sci-fi movies of late, Part 2 sits right at the top, scoring 6% more than Dune Part 1 and much, much higher than the recent Zack Snyder film, Rebel Moon. My rating of 88% seems actually to be on the lower side compared to the scores on Rotten Tomatoes. The critic score, after more than 300 reviews, is 94%. The audience score is even higher, currently standing at 95%. The IMDb user rating so far is 9 out of 10, which is further evidence that Dune Part 2 is a truly, truly brilliant film. If you enjoyed this video, then consider subscribing to the channel. I release videos like this every week, covering the best films and shows around. Next up, I'll be reviewing Kung Fu Panda 4 and ranking Christopher Nolan's movies by their box office numbers. If you really like this video, then consider becoming a member and joining Film Club. Thank you for watching, and see you again.